On Christmas Eve 1945, George and Jenny Sodder woke to a house full of smoke. They escaped into the freezing night with 4 of their children, but the other 5 were trapped upstairs. By morning, the house was a pile of smoldering ash. When the fire marshal sifted through the basement that morning, he found something impossible. There were no bodies and no bones, not even a single tooth. For George Sodder, an Italian immigrant, the missing remains suggested a dark alternative to death. George had been highly vocal in his local community, criticizing the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini. He quickly concluded his 5 children hadn't burned. They had been kidnapped by the Sicilian mafia in an act of political revenge. The physical evidence around the property seemed to confirm a coordinated attack. George's heavy ladder was missing from its usual spot. His 2 coal trucks suddenly refused to start, and the phone line connecting the house to the town had been deliberately severed. For the grieving parents, 5 bodies completely vaporizing in a standard house fire defied the laws of physics. A meticulously planned winter abduction was the only logical explanation. Jenny Sodder refused to accept the official death certificates. She started conducting her own forensic experiments in the yard, burning chicken, beef, and pork bones to see if fire could completely obliterate them. Every time, she was left with a charred, identifiable heap of bones. Looking for professional data, she contacted a local crematorium. An employee explained that fully reducing a human skeleton to unidentifiable ash requires 2 hours of sustained heat at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. According to the local fire department, the Sodder house collapsed into the basement in just 45 minutes. The math simply did not add up. Based on the accepted timelines and the thermodynamic data available to the public in 1945, Jenny's logic was flawless. The fire could not have destroyed her children, but modern fire science tells a different story. The Sodder home was built using balloon framing, a construction technique where empty wall cavities run continuously from the foundation to the roof. Once ignited, these hollow walls act like giant chimneys, pulling oxygen up and accelerating the flames. The rapid spread of the fire was only half the equation. The house was heated by a coal furnace, meaning there was a massive supply of coal stored directly in the basement, right beneath the children's bedrooms. The belief that the fire extinguished in 45 minutes was a crucial error. While the house collapsed quickly, the burning coal and heavy timber trapped in the basement continued to burn at extreme temperatures all night long and well into the next morning. And then, driven by grief, George Sodder made a well-intentioned mistake. Before a proper forensic team could examine the site, he bulldozed 5 feet of dirt over the ruins, intending to turn the scarred earth into a memorial garden. By capping the smoldering ruins with heavy soil, he accidentally insulated the coal. Trapping the thermal energy deep underground created a subterranean kiln, an environment hot enough to easily incinerate the softer, developing bones of young adolescents. The balloon framing dropped the children into a basement filled with high-yield fuel. Then the dirt cap sealed them inside. The house inadvertently replicated the exact thermodynamic conditions of an industrial crematorium. The reason no remains were identified the morning after the fire comes down to the era's investigative standards. The volunteer fire department performed a brief 2-hour visual sweep of the still hot ashes. Today, processing a fatal fire scene requires weeks of meticulous sifting by trained forensic anthropologists. Years later, in 1949, a private excavation did recover a few human vertebrae from the site, giving the family false hope. But Smithsonian analysts noted these bones showed 0 fire damage. They hadn't come from the children. They had arrived in the fill dirt George hauled in from a nearby cemetery to cover the basement. As for the sabotage, the mundane realities eventually surfaced. A local thief admitted to cutting the phone line while stealing a block and tackle, thinking it was a power cord. And the trucks likely flooded because a panicked father was desperately trying to start frozen engines in the middle of a winter night. An agonizing series of coincidences, combined with a botched initial search, created a perfect storm of confirmation bias. The family looked at a chaotic, unscientific investigation and saw a coordinated conspiracy. The Sodders never stopped looking for their missing children. Jenny wore mourning black for the rest of her life, and the family erected a massive billboard on Route 16, asking for leads. It stood there for 40 years. The enduring tragedy of the case is that George Sodder's desperate rush to memorialize the site is the very action that destroyed the physical evidence he needed to finally find peace. The thermodynamic analysis leaves little room for doubt. The 5 children were trapped on the 2nd floor and died when the house collapsed into the basement inferno. There was no mastermind kidnapping. The mystery of the Sodder children was born from a tragic overlap of extreme heat, grieving parents, and 1940s investigative incompetence. The authorities left a vacuum of evidence, and a devastated family filled it with hope.